everyone, Comic Reviewer here, this time reviewing on Simpsons Comics, issue number 36. Now, as you know, Simpsons Comics was the comic series done by Bongo Comics, the same company that did Futurama, Treehouse of Horror, Bart Simpson, and so many other titles. And the cover mainly has Homer with the three nerds, and Bart blaming himself, despite the issue clearly not. And it starts off how the three nerds, Benjamin, Douglas, and Gary, get kicked out from what they assume is heaven, but turns out the dean says they've already graduated and that they can't no longer keep them around. So the three friends decide to find better work and that the world would be their oyster. So of course they try the museum, the Quickie Mart, the library, and pretty much comic book guy, and which they ask where will their beds be, which he says, "No, you may sleep on the unsold boxes of snowboarding Batman and privileged aggressive Wolverine action figures." So pretty much at a big convention, Homer's dropping off Lisa to meet sort of like a Cena-like parody character, and turns out Troy McClure was in the episode. And they say, "Whoa, a piece to stay, and we get to meet Hina. Her series is fantastic, except for episode 37. Come on, guys, I thought Don Knotts made a pretty good centaur." And so the other female nerds assume that Benjamin's meant to be Urkel, Homer's listening to the radio, and they all come out asking for help. And pretty much Homer says to get into the back, which he does, which they do with Grandpa getting out, and Hina saying, "Well, sold this for a kinky tail. Feathers, I'm out of here." And so Homer pretty much drives back home, unaware that he forgot about the three nerds. And of course Homer's annoyed about the calendar, decides to, watch TV with Lisa, and of course starts to realise what's really happening and thinks he forgot something, which turns out he thinks it's Stampy, and finds out he's okay. And Bart manages to break out the three nerds, and of course Homer cleans it, knowing full well whatever happened in there wasn't good. And Marge says, "I don't want them living in our house. They're disturbing." "But Marge, they don't take up a lot of room, and they live on Krusty Kremios and Buzz Cola. They're like sea monkeys, but without the keep." So of course Marge is reluctant to let them stay, and decides for them to stay. And of course Homer watches them work, and finds them completely boring. But Bart basically does some tests, and eventually sees that they're working on a game, which he accidentally sended, and they think he's deleted it. So of course turns out the game became an instant hit, and they've worked on one that's meant to be a parody of Doom. And Homer is quick to assume that the character that's meant to be him is Mr. Sparkles. So of course the game hits through the roof. Marge pretty much now knows that it's time for them to go, and Lionel Hutz offers them some real work, Douglas with Troy McClure, and turns out Troy McClure's gardener is Will Shatner, who says, "You weeds say you want peace, yet you attack these innocent tulips. When will you learn? When will we all learn?" So of course Troy McClure wants Douglas to work on his next big movie, and turns out Gary is working for Mr. Burns, and there is a parody of DuckTales. And turns out Benjamin is working with Professor Frank, working on an edible car, which is made out of lard, and with his help can make it work properly. So, of course, Homer pretty much does watch TV and pretty much loses his beer, and him and Barney talking that, and turns out Mr. Black is working secretly to get the company. And of course Mr. Burns shows Gary around, which he shows him the stock market way, and pretty much points out that this is how it's meant to be. And of course Mr. Black tries to give Homer free beer and that, which of course he tries to persuade, and turns out it all starts to fall apart with the other works. For example, Douglas is quick to make space movies a bit realistic, and Troy McCall realizing that nobody really likes what's happened except Comic Book Guy. Benjamin works on the car and that, something happens that kind of leaves Professor Frank without a lab. And of course, turns out Mr. Burns can't work on computers due to radioactiveness. And I like how, despite that the hounds are back at the mansion, Mr. Burns uses Smithers as a substitute. And Lenny looking on thinking, what's going on? So of course, Mr. Black says that he keeps giving them beer, and that they keep on rejecting the offer. And of course, Homer stupidly gives power of attorney to Barney, and later on it's shown that they've lost the company, and Homer apologizing, but turns out the three nerds are happy with their old life again, and that they've been offered by a bankrupt company for room and dorm and to help finance their company. And of course gives Homer some mementos, with Homer saying, Crustios with triple stuff, so the legends were true. And this is the story. So issue 36 feels like a sequel to the Homer College episode, and would actually be an interesting story. It has the plot of an episode, feels good, and I think it deserves a thumbs up. Still good, and still alright. So, Comic Reviewer here, signing out.